today I was going to look at poetry about spring. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought I'd just start off with looking about what is poetry, because the reason I got interested about poetry now is that I think like yesterday, or no, this month was Poetry Month, but in America, not here. We have ours in October, apparently. But the thing that's always bothered me about poetry, and I was saying to Bill earlier, I like to explore things that I'm not entirely familiar with. So I'm in no way, and not even a moderate expert on poetry. I know nothing, but I thought it'd be just interesting to look at some of the views on what poetry is. So if the words have rhyme and meter, it's poetry, or any words composed in lines are poetry. Poetry leaves something out. Erasure turns prose into poems. Now, here's somebody I'm going to come back onto, Ezra Pound. Is a poem just prose chopped into lines and prose in costume? Then there's the more sort of esoteric view. A poem doesn't communicate nothing, rather it communicates nothing. It speaks about the void, it telegraphs mystery. And then if you look at more modern things, are rappers poetic? I think in some ways they are. Very. And have you heard of the Insta poets?
No.
It deserves the whole thing in itself. Rupi Kaur, who's been in the best-selling lists in America for over 20 odd weeks, has got 1.8 million followers on Instagram, and there is a whole genre of Instagram poets, which means short poems, which I tend to like short poems, because with long poems I very rarely get to the end, personally. That's just being honest, you know. I sort of start thinking about food, or I get in a coffee or something, and then that's it. Anyway,
I know the feeling.
Anyway, I thought I'd say a bit about that. But there again, I suppose adding breaks to a paragraph is not always going to make an interesting poem either. But with rap, it's very good about rhyming in song, which I think does work out. Rap to me does sound quite poetic sometimes.
Yes, I think I agree with that. Yeah. And it has a rhythm as well, doesn't it?
Yes. You kind of, you don't catch it all, but you can't catch enough words to make it have some sort of meaning. And therefore you can listen to it again and get an additional sort of meaning. So it's a very modern form of poetry, and it's very fast. And I suppose slam poetry must be a bit like that as well, where people have meetings in pubs and stuff and do very quick, almost competitive poems. I've never been to one, so I don't know what they're like anyway. Has anybody been to a slam poetry session?
Never
Graham,
heard of it.
Must have been. No, nothing from Graham. Right, getting back onto the spring poetry. This is, of course, is my...
Here we go.
Yeah.
Tune your brains in.
My favourite poem of all time, though I've only ever read 2 pages of it, and it goes on for page after page, so I can't really...
I know, I did it for exams.
Oh, Sandy's here.
But I always, right from the start, like this first little bit.
I like that. Yeah.
Say, one that April with his showers suitor, the droghs of March has passed to the rooter, and bathed every vein in switch liqueur, of which virtue engendered is the fluor. And I think you can get the meaning of it without really knowing the meaning, isn't it? It's a sort of the idea that things are shooting up, and there's all this, you know, the stuff that flowers are sending up. Going out the other day, I was seeing all the blossom on the floor after it'd been a big wind, and it looks, for a while, it looks really beautiful, doesn't it? All that pink floated by the wind into interesting patterns. Gosh,
I think the word flower is interesting.
Yes,
presumably it's a blooming flower, not the type you bake with, because it's sort of interesting.
Bathed in every vein, essentially.
Yeah.
By the way, that image is from a 15th century depiction from a manuscript with that's one of the side images of pilgrims leaving the city of Canterbury in the early 15th century. Though it was written a long time ago, wasn't it? Amazing, really. Right, so that's Chaucer. Now, where is the link to the wasteland, you might think? Well, apparently
April.
it's April, but it's also, apparently 40% of the wastelands are Eliot's notes in which he references Chaucer. So it was almost like a response to Chaucer, which I didn't know. I don't know how true that is. I read it somewhere. Anyway, he starts it off with this, which is a very different view of April, really. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. And by and large, the wasteland is about desolation, disillusion, and futility. Has anybody read it through to the end? Wasteland.
Yes.
Well
Did
done.
it? Well,
Had to.
no, I
Had
had to.
to.
We did it for A-level. It was on our A-level syllabus.
Ah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and the four quartets and all it, you know.
Did you enjoy
But it's
it?
not my favourite because I never really understood what it was all about.
I found it extraordinary because it's all about connections, memory, visceral memory. It's all the turning of life, and that and going into the four quartets as well. The connections. I find it all extraordinary.
Well, Bill, you'll have to do a piece on T.S. Eliot. I'd really like to be converted.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, indeed.
But it was obviously very much after the First World War, which changed everything, didn't it?
Yeah,
including poetry.
That's why it seems to me so depressing. You know, to me, it's a very...
Well, it must have been a very deep... What can you imagine it? It's just unbelievable, really, isn't it, what happened?
Mm.
But I find it's not the content of the poetry that can be depressing. It's the evolution of the time and how the poets were trying to get themselves out of that fear of what was suppressing them and keeping them down, not just in poetry, but in every manner of communication, of art, of all kinds. And you should look at Chagall, Bernard.
For his paintings in relation to that. I presume it's his paintings rather than poetry.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, the Ezra Pound, where does he come into it? Well, The Wasteland was dedicated to Ezra Pound, and T.S. Eliot said that he thought that Ezra Pound was the better poet in some ways. Mm-hmm. And he was also, they were both seen as modernists, and if you like, trying to get out of the old styles of doing things like poetry. And they were strong advocates of vorticism, which I'm sure you've all heard of, which I had, but I didn't know much about. And it actually would deserve a whole presentation in itself because it's really interesting. Mm. And has anybody heard about this? I know, going slightly off topic here. Anybody heard about the Vorticist Manifesto in June 1914, edited by Wyndham Lewis, who was
No, I'd never even heard the word. So this is a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the cover of the original manifesto from June 1914. And what I think was really interesting, here's one page from it. Just look at the layout of that. Every page was a different form of typography and different way of looking at things. You know, it was an experiment in graphic design. And it had an incredibly vitriolic tone to it. But it actually looks quite modern, doesn't it? In a way that Victorian stuff wouldn't. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting. I've never seen it before. And it was just, I don't even really know what it's getting to, but it certainly feels a lot to it. In fact, I think the only thing that I can think of blasts of the Vorticist movement was the designs on the side of warships. You remember those? The very, very abstract patterns to make them less visible in the water, which I thought were very much a kind of Vorticist type of thing. Anyway, moving swiftly on, as we haven't got that much time to get back to spring. Here's a picture of him. I think it was from 2000. In 1913, yes.
13, yes,
Yeah.
that's at the bottom.
Yeah, well, I've got it covered up with your photos, as we can see.
Yeah, I can see the bottom line.
But don't you think he looks very modern? I
Yeah.
think he does.
Yes, very modern.
You could expect to see him at, you know, in the local Chorlton wine bar or something like that.
Yes, yeah, perhaps.
I don't know why I'm condemning him with that.
I think it's very attractive.
Yeah. If you cover the bottom of his face, he's got a look of Andy about him. I think it's the hair, the really thick, dark hair.
Yeah.
If you cover the bottom.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep. Yeah, good one. Anyway, he wrote one on April as well. And this is what I like about it. That's the full poem.
Oh, that suits me.
Three spirits.
It says it
came
all,
to me.
doesn't it, though?
Yeah. 3 spirits came to me and drew me apart to where the olive boughs lay stripped upon the ground. Pale carnage.
Pale carnage beneath it, bright mist. That's
It's almost haiku-like, isn't it, really? But it's not.
Yes, it is. It is. I like it. I like that.
Right. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Here's the final one. They're all linked together, these. They all were influential with each other. Has anybody heard of Edna St Vincent Millay?
Yeah.
No.
She was the most popular poet in America by far in her early years, after she won a contest when she was, I think, just a teenager.
Wow.
And when they discovered that she was a teenager from somewhere in Maine, they took the prize off her. That created such a furore; it became the most famous poet in America. And she went on poetry reading tours. She was very good looking, and had a very bohemian and very active feminist as well. She didn't end up too well because she apparently. You can see that there. Thomas Hardy said that America boasted 2 great achievements: a skyscraper and the work of Edna St Vincent Millay.
Wow.
Right. I'd never heard of her.
We were very young, we were very merry, we went back and forth all night on the ferry.
Is that one of hers?
Oh, I'm writing that down. I'm going to look her up.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think she's one of those American poets and writers, a bit like Sylvia Plath and Ernest Hemingway, whose lives were even more dramatic than their art. You know, who remembered more to a certain extent, because she's gone out of fashion. She isn't seen as the very fashionable poet anymore, but it's certainly worth having a look at. And that's a spring poem from her.
To what purpose?
Well, I won't read all of it because there's another page of that, but you can see there. To what purpose, April, do you return again? Beauty is not enough. You can no longer quiet me with the redness of little leaves opening stickily. I know what I know. The sun is hot on my neck as I observe the spikes of the crocus. The smell of the earth is good. It is apparent there is no death. But what does that signify? Not only underground are the brains of men eaten by maggots. Life in itself is nothing. An empty cup, a flight of uncarpeted stairs. It is not enough that yearly down this hill, April comes like an idiot, babbling and strewing flowers.
Oh, I like that line.
that last line's worth it all, isn't it? Really? Whoops, that's the end. Of it.
Very good line.
Enough of me. Has anybody else got poems? You've been doing a bit of research, haven't you, Bill? You've muted.
Yeah, indeed. I think for me though, that as you've shown, poetry is a spoken art. And for anything, you were talking about rappers, about whatever, without pulse, without that rhythm, we don't make sense of what the writer absolutely intends. And it's that sense of time and space and line and balance. You could have, if you sit and you read a poem, you only enter the poem when you voice it.
I disagree, but
certainly
that's a musician speaking.
No, it's not a musician speaking, it's a human. That there are many languages that have the same word for song as for poem. The Russian piesmo, and the Bosnians, the Serbians, the Croatians, piesma, and it means song, and it also means poem. It's that sense of you have the ordinary that the individual turns into the extraordinary via their fingerprint, via their own take on the language that they use on a daily basis. And it's not just being clever about shifting bits around or having 2 words on a line or 4 words on a line. I mean, Blast and Ezra Pound and also in France, Mallarmé and Apollinaire and Rimbaud before that, they were all looking at not just the presentation of writing. Verlaine did the same thing, but it was the spoken word that mattered. It's performance to draw you in, and that's exactly what rapping is.
Agreeing that poetry is it includes what Bill says, but I don't believe it's just about the spoken word. I think it's something much more internal than that, and you don't have to speak it to appreciate and to feel what poems are about. I think you've got a voice inside you and in your head which says that. You don't have to stand up and speak it.
I think perhaps what Bill means though is that we do speak it in our heads as well.
Anything to do with language, you speak in your head.
Yes, of course.
I think there's a rhythm to it as well. There has to be a rhythm, because when you speak poetry, if the rhythm is there, that keeps you interested, and it's like a beat in music. So you have this rhythm, which is marvelous, I think, and a lot of poetry is like that.
It's certainly the manner of performance and I do agree with you, Sandy, that when you read something, you have your internal voice, but when you're communicating it to someone else, that's what I mean about the performance. It's like playing a piece of music. If it's not played the rhythm that's intended, but we're not entirely certain of what the rhythm is intended within the poetry, because there are no graphics to guide it, other than sporadic punctuation of one kind or another. But I've got a Ted Hughes thing here, April Birthday, and would you mind if I read a bit of this?
Please do.
Yeah, I will see. When your birthday brings the world under your window, and the song thrush sings wet-throated in the dew, and aconite and primrose are unsticking the wrappers of the package that has come today for you. Lambs bounce out and stand astonished. Puss willow pushes among bare branches. Sooty hawthorns shiver into emerald air, and the new air nuzzles the sugary buds of the chestnut. A groundswell and the stir billows the silvered violet silks of the south. A tenderness lifting through all the gently breasted counties of England. I mean, it goes on quite a lot more, but that sense of ebb and flow of his take, and it's from his sequence that he calls Spring Nature Notes. And the very last one, and rabbits are bobbing everywhere, and a thrush rings coolly in a far corner. A shiver of green strokes the darkening slope as the land begins her labour.
Wow.
Read a poem about a thrush, because I love this poem, and it's by John Clare, who was an 18th century, early 19th century poet who eventually went mad. But it's incredibly simple, and it rhymes, and all of it except the last line is just very, in a way, prosaic. There's nothing extraordinary really about it, and then the last line explodes, and I think it's just so beautiful because it it's like suddenly you're in a drone and it opens up a landscape, and it's wonderful. So it's called The Thrush's Nest by John Clare. Thrush Nest.
Oh, fabulous.
Within a thick and spreading hawthorn bush that overhung a molehill large and round, I heard from morn to morn a merry thrush sing hymns to sunrise, and I drank the sound with joy, and often an intruding guest, I watched her secret toil from day to day, how true she walked the moss to form a nest, and modelled it within with wood and clay. And by, like heath bells gilt with dew, there lay her shining eggs, as bright as flowers, ink-spotted over shells of greeny blue. And there I witnessed, in the sunny hours, a brood of nature's minstrels chirp and fly, glad as the sunshine and the laughing sky. And I think that last line is just...
Yeah. Yes.
That's the poetry. The rest of the poem isn't the poetry. That's the poetry.
I liked it all.
I thought it was very good. Yes, I like it. Visualize it.
Where did you get that from?
It was a Christmas card or a birthday card sent to me.
It's a lovely one, yeah. Any other poems?
Yeah, I wrote one last night about spring, seeing as that was the premise. But on the pages of a thesaurus, the word spring can mean so much. A verb, a noun, an adjective, ideas and thoughts and such. To be resilient or elastic, to issue with force and speed, to stretch out to extended height, much growth from a single seed, a time or season of development, a source of supply, like water, an act of leaping upwards, from loins, a son or daughter. We wait all through the winter for spring to finally appear. T-shirt still neatly folded away, still wearing winter gear. Should we put out bedding plants, or will they all be lost by the foxy reappearance of that sneaky old Jack Frost? I place some peanuts inside the tall bird feeder. Each day the squirrel nicks them, the greedy little blighter. The season comes in fits and starts. Birds and blossom make their shows. Then the wind rips through the branches just to keep us on our toes. But the trees are suddenly covered in a million shades of green. Shoots miraculously appear from nowhere. Frogs and toads again on the scene. Despite its many setbacks, false alarms and fake arrival, it is my favorite season, still signaling life's survival for now.
That was very good.
Really good, Graham. Well done. That's really nice. So it cheered me up, this.
Oh, good. Were you down?
Since I went down the Vortices Road, yes.
Very.
Anybody else?
I can just share, listening to the radio this morning, Radio 4, and you had Maureen Lipman on, just being asked different questions by the interviewer. And they started talking about grief and when you lose somebody, because she was married at first, wasn't she, Jack Rosenthal. And she said it a couple of times. She said, I couldn't read a novel. She said, I just couldn't read a novel. But poetry, she said, I could read it over and over. And so there must be somehow that words in a particular way speak to you. Because I even like with me, like I find Pamela's really funny because of the way she uses words and twists the subject. But then I like listening to Lemsey say as well, with So there's different types of poetry, isn't it?
Yeah, because you get everything like John Cooper Clarke talking about Beasley Street to the
like Milligan.
He was the first rapper. He was the first rapper.
Don't ring me. Sorry, Derek.
He was the first rapper.
Yes, yes.
Not necessarily the first, but you know what I mean? That machine gun, bang, bang, bang. In relation to the discussion between, you know, reading a poem or performing a poem, I suppose, I mean, I read Shelley, and I was especially into the First World War poets. But the thing that really engaged us was the performance poets like the Mersey poets, and you know, so I don't think I mean, I'm not fussy about the definitions here, you know, on purity, in the sense that, you know, both are or the I mean in our writing group, virtually anything anyone writes is accepted as poetry. I love live, like Bill, I really love you know, hearing live poetry. And
do you want me to? It's
Yeah,
a
go
poem
on,
I wrote
Sandy.
called An Early Spring.
Yeah.
Oh yes, do read it. I'm just going to
Please.
stick the cooker on. I've forgotten.
It's quite an old one, isn't it? It may not be a poem. I don't know if it's a poem or not. An Early Spring. Easter eggs are in the shops, and cards for Mother's Day are on display. Nature takes her chance, seeking her own profit. The robin's song is bright and purposeful. Grass grows greening the hill, and cows are out. Heather bells that winter white are flushed with pink. Geraniums show new leaf, and garden roses bud. The mole heaves earth and tunnels towards the mate. Mosquitoes gather for their evening dance. The air is temperate and moist, and when the sun comes, warmth comes too. But this is not March departing like a lamb, nor April with its gentle showers, nor merry May. It's two-faced Janus month, and though we're up and running, stirred to life, somewhere over our shoulder is the north wind.
Good.
Oh,
Nice
gosh.
stuff.
Yeah, crikey.
That's my one attempt at writing about spring.
But there's also, you know, that we were talking about the music, rhythm, etc. And one of the most famous pieces, the Four Seasons of Vivaldi, were written as poems. Vivaldi wrote them as poems before he wrote the music. And, can I remind us just a little bit of spring?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Can
I just
share it, I think.
Springtime is upon us. The birds celebrate her return with festive song, and murmuring streams are softly caressed by the breezes. Thunderstorms, those heralds of spring, roar, casting their dark man over heaven. Then they die away to silence, and the birds take up their charming songs once more. And here we have. Okay, I'm aware of time.
Yeah,
so
it's getting a bit close, isn't it?
Enjoyed that.
That was very, very soothing.
It's lovely. Vivaldi's
Yeah.
marvellous.
And you know, you're talking about rappers as well. You could go back to the 1920s when Edith Sitwell wrote Facade, and she wrote it to be spoken to music. And she did know her own sense of shyness did not want to be seen, and so she devised this screen with a megaphone. So when Walton wrote the Facade music, she was behind the screen and rapping to a 7-piece ensemble in 1923, I think it was 23, 24.